Welcome to VMFA for this evening's program in celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month. My name is Celeste Feta, and I'm manager of adult and higher education here at the museum. And it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Jennifer Foley. Jennifer first became interested in Asia as an undergraduate at Brooklyn College. An interest in the Chinese language led to a semester in Nanjing, China, followed by a nearly 2-year stay in Hanoi, Vietnam. She attended graduate school at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, where she studied Asian art history. She has since returned to Southeast Asia to conduct field research, spending two more years living in Cambodia and Vietnam before completing her doctorate. You can also go to our blog and see her on a motorcycle in Vietnam, which I really encourage you to do because it's a great picture. She has been with VMFA for almost 2 years now, right? And she's an outstanding addition to the Education and Statewide Partnerships Department. We're very lucky to have her. And I know that you'll be delighted and informed by her talk this evening, Walking the Royal Road, the Ancient Kingdom of Angkor. Jennifer?
Thank you very much. So I'm very happy to be here to give this talk tonight, and also to have the opportunity to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. I did write my dissertation on Cambodia, so it's very exciting to be able to give a talk about something that I really have a really deep love for. So I thought I'd start. Actually, this is one of my photographs because I had the wonderful opportunity of spending a fair amount of time in Cambodia and have been to Angkor a number of times. And prior to going, I had spent several years actually researching Angkor and various different temples in that area. I'd seen hundreds of photographs, I'd seen the plans, I'd seen all of those things. And the one thing I have to say is that it still did not prepare me for actually going. That even after having spent years studying all of these places, when I got to the stairs, I burst into tears. It was so amazing. So it really is just an astonishing place, and none of the photographs here will do justice. So of course I'm going to have to encourage everybody here to go to Cambodia. And I thought we'd start with a map, because maps are always good. Just to sort of give you an idea of the placement, this map sort of situates Cambodia in Southeast Asia, and you can see it in relation to India as well, and then with a little bit at the bottom and on the world. And then a map of Cambodia itself. And there are a couple of things that made it possible for the civilization of Angkor to rise and become as powerful as it did, and that really influenced the sort of turns that it took, particularly in terms of art and architecture. And one of the things to understand about Cambodia in this area is what happens with the Tonle Sap, which you can see here. This is a very large lake that's sort of in the middle of Cambodia. And it's called the Tonle Sap, and it is fed into by a number of rivers, but one of the rivers that it connects up to, sort of toward the bottom, is the Mekong. And what happens is that every year there's so much water that is flowing down from melted snow in the Himalayas that the river actually changes course and reverses itself. Parts of it actually begin to flow upstream, but there's such an overflow that it pushes into that Tonle Sap. So that lake doubles in size every year. And when it doubles in size, it floods out, obviously, into the countryside. And so you can see some images here of the flooding. And actually, this is a good thing, because when it does that, it brings with it all of the silt that has been coming downstream, and that silt is very, very rich. And it also brings fish. So there's just huge bounty of fish that occurs at that point, and so people are able to add even more protein into their diets, but also that it makes it possible to have rice fields that look like this, that are just incredibly verdant and rich, and it makes it possible for there to be a tremendous harvest every year. And this has been going on for millennia. So this is one of the sort of foundational pieces of information about thinking about the rise of Angkor, was that one of the reasons why it was possible was because you had this cycle that was going on every year that made this part of the world an incredibly rich place agriculturally. So it's sort of a place to start from. The other thing that is important to contemplate is
the movement of ideas having to do with particularly religions that were going throughout Asia, going back to the first centuries of the Common Era. There is a movement from India, or from the area that is now India, of lots of traders going back and forth and other people going back and forth who were bringing religious ideas. And in particular, there is a movement of ideas related to Hinduism. This is the sort of Hindu trinity, which consists of Shiva. These images are from India, so this gives you an idea of the things that are sort of being brought from India and arriving in Cambodia. So we have Shiva, we have Vishnu, who's shown here with two of his consorts, and Brahma. These are the sort of three deities that make up the Hindu trinity. And so we see images in Cambodia within the following centuries. We begin to see these images of the same gods that appear in Cambodia and also in other parts of Southeast Asia. We see this also occurring in what is now Thailand. We see it occurring in Burma. We see it occurring to a lesser extent in what is now Java. There was this kind of movement of these religious ideas out across Southeast Asia. The other very important religious idea that also travels to Southeast Asia and travels specifically to Cambodia is Buddhism. And so this is an Indian image of Buddha, but we see especially some of the very earliest pieces that have been found in what is today Cambodia are actually Buddhist images. And there have been some thoughts as to whether or not there might have been a kind of class differentiation in terms of worship, whether Hinduism was something that the upper classes practiced, while the middle class and lower class would have practiced Buddhism, but I don't think it's really been kind of decided one way or the other. Some of the earliest images that have been found are votive images, very small images that would have been transportable, so it really gives a sense of how these things were moving around. And there was a lot of trade going on at the same time as well. Thinking about the size of Cambodia, we have, again, this image of Cambodia as it is today in the bottom right, when that's not what it was always like. When it was the Khmer Empire, it actually took over a very significant amount of what we think of as Southeast Asia today. If we look at the two maps here, this one down here, the green part is the kingdom of Champa. The Cham are an ethnic minority that still lives in Vietnam today. They used to have a very large kingdom, as you can see, until the Vietnamese, who were at the time called the Dai Viet, sort of gradually moved south, and the Cham as a people were sort of subsumed within the larger power of the Vietnamese. But at the time of the Khmer Empire, this area down here was the Cham, and they are important, very important in Cambodian history because there's a lot of back and forth in terms of battles that go on and fighting, and it has a big influence on what happens to Cambodia over time. But looking at this other map, you can see how far over the Khmer Empire spread, and it spreads well into what is today Thailand. The place that we think of as Thailand, which used to be called Siam, didn't really start to kind of break away as a separate place until about the 15th century. So up until then, most of this was really part of the Khmer Empire, as well as a lot of what we think of today as southern Vietnam. Like the city of Saigon was in the Khmer Empire if you go back several hundred years. And in the earliest pieces that we see, the earliest sculptures that we see coming from the Khmer Empire, you can see the clear influence of Indian art and Indian imagery of those Hindu deities. And so the one on the left is from India, and the one on the right is a very early pre-Angkorian piece from what is today Cambodia. And so the sort of timeline in Cambodian history is broken into the pre-Angkorian, Angkorian, and the post-Angkorian. So we start today with the pre-Angkorian pieces. The one on the right is thought of as Phnom Da style, and that is kind of the baseline. The earliest pieces that we have are really from that period. And actually that word Phnom Da means a large hill, and there is an archaeological site that's in kind of central southern Cambodia where a lot of these pieces were found. And we see that influence of that Indian style going on for a fair amount of time in Cambodian sculpture. As you can see here, that we still have that kind of mitered top the kind of helmety thing that he's got on, and even the style of the body, the style of the face, looks somewhat different from what we see happening later when we get a much more specifically Khmer style occurring. Once we get out of the pre-Angkorian, there's actually not terribly many pieces from the pre-Angkorian period, and there are no buildings that have survived. We know that they probably had temples of some sort. They may not have been made out of stone. They probably weren't. They may have been wood, and this would probably explain why we don't have any of those buildings today. But the ones that we're really going to be concentrating on today are all from the Angkorian period. And this map is actually, this is the map that you'll get if you visit Cambodia and you go to Angkor, and they will give you this so that you can find your way around to all of the temples in what is today called the Angkor Historical Park. So Angkor is not just one temple, it's actually a very large group of temples that are all in what is really a park-like setting that the French had set up during the colonial period as a sort of separate entity. So, but this gives you an idea. If you look at this map, you can see there's a lot of names on it. And the Khmer Empire was very, very busy with the building. So they have lots and lots and lots of temples, and they're all sort of grouped into a small area. And they're not all tremendously large. Some of them are small, some of them are really no more than one tower, and some of them are very much monumental. So they're sort of in a variety of shapes and sizes, but you can see that there's a significant number of them. And this represents building that took place over about 3.5, 4 centuries. So the earliest temples that we have from the Angkorian period are these ones, and this Lolai group were built during the reign of Indravarman II. He was not the first Angkorian king. The first Angkorian king was named Jayavarman II, and he reigned from 1802 to 1834. And the thing about Jayavarman II is that we don't actually know a whole lot about him, but there are a number of kings that come later, including a very, very important one, who kind of throw back to that name. So that name Jayavarman keeps coming back again and again, and particularly at the kind of close of the Angkorian period, we see that name being used. And they're not a direct lineage. It is kind of a borrowing of the legitimacy of an earlier king by borrowing the name. So this group was built by Indravarman I, and what we see is the beginnings of what really we think of as being that Khmer style, where there is that tiered tower, often grouped where there's 2 or 3, sometimes 5. This here, you can see the tiers going up where we have kind of plants coming out of it. The other thing that comes out in this is the decoration that we begin to see in these temples that tells us the direction we're going to be going in with all temples from this point forward. The decoration on temples in Cambodia is just amazing. And it's amazing what has survived. I mean, you're thinking about this is something from the late 800s. So the fact that we still have anything to look at is really kind of spectacular. The other thing that we see is with that decoration, there is, particularly in these earlier pieces, there's sometimes 2 different materials going on. The sculpture will be done using a sandstone or a granite, and then a more porous stone is actually used for the building. So often the building itself looks like it's in rougher shape than the sculpture. But there is a lot of focus on detail, particularly with things like the lintels, which we see on the right-hand side here, and also with doorways where there's a lot of attention to detail here and a lot of false doorways. A lot of these buildings will have these false doorways that are just exquisitely decorated. And so even from the very first buildings, we're seeing this amazing attention to detail, and incredible amount of effort and time is being put into the decoration of everything, down to, the sort of these little kind of brick things that are popping out of a false doorway. I mean, this isn't even the entrance, so a lot of work has gone into something that isn't even the way you get in. This is the first temple that really is showing us the map of what a Cambodian temple is. And I use the word map very specifically because the temples that the Khmer built are, in fact, maps. They are cosmological maps. They are maps of the universe as understood by the Khmer. And so what you see in these temples is this kind of recreation of a mountain. And they are actually recreating a mountain. They're recreating a cosmological mountain. And so this, you'll see kind of this shape repeat itself over and over as we go through this. It's the same temple from a different angle, but you see there's that kind of central tower that is the tallest, and then the tiers come down and it gets wider but shorter as it comes down. And this is an elevation, also a plan to sort of show you the way that it's shaped, where we have these tiers that each one of these goes up, up, up until you get to that central prang, the central tower that is the tallest point, which you can see in the elevation here. And what this is recreating is this. And this is a mandala that is actually a cosmological map. This one is not from Cambodia, but it gives you a sense of what those temples are recreating in 3 dimensions on a massive scale. They are recreating this map, which is a map of the universe. It's this. And what it is a recreation of the sacred Mount Meru. Now, Mount Meru and the mountain range that it existed in, Mount Meru is at the center, and then each of the mountains is surrounded by a sea, which surrounds it, another range of mountains, another sea, a range of mountains, which is what you're looking at on the right-hand side. This is Meru at the center, and then each of the light ones are ranges of mountains. The dark ones are actually kind of almost moat-like oceans that surround them. And so that's really what we're seeing when we see that kind of square with each level going up, is that it's representing each of those tiers of that cosmological map of Mount Meru. And this kind of comes to a head with this temple, the Bakeng, because this temple is not just it's not just that prang in the middle that is sort of standing up very nice and tall. It's actually situated on a hill. So rather than trying to just recreate that hill, they actually placed it on a hill. And so you get this sort of spectacular view of looking off from this hill. It's the highest point in that whole area. It's actually very flat as you look around. So it's the one kind of really tall geological formation, and sitting at the top of it is this stone terrace with the temple of the Bakeng. And as you look off into the distance, I took this at sunrise, so it's a little dark, but right over here, there is a tower, and that is the central prang, or the central tower of Angkor Wat. So this was done several hundred years before Angkor Wat, but it certainly was done. Angkor Wat was created with the idea that it would be viewed from the Bakeng. And so they're sort of situated in relation to each other in that sense. And it is a very spectacular view. It's really good to go there at sunrise. So as we look at this map again, now I said that there were these mountain ranges, and each mountain range goes out very much like those temples are structured. So that Mount Meru in the middle is the tallest point, and then each of the ranges is sort of shorter as you come down. But as I said, each of them is surrounded by a moat-like ocean. And those moat-like oceans are, in fact, recreated. The use of water during the Angkorian period is really very, very interesting. The Khmer built a massive and very complex series of canals in order to sort of control that water and to be able to irrigate out beyond the range of the flood from the Tonle Sap. So they took what was already making the kingdom very wealthy and then extended it out. And there is a pretty amazing technological advance. And they also had reservoirs that are called barai, and that's actually what this is a picture of, is the Eastern Barai. And if we look at this image from space, this is actually a picture that NASA has on their website. This is that barai that we just looked at. So the barai are, I mean, they're massive. They're absolutely huge. They are visible from space. You know, they are just tremendous. And you can see that actually there's 2 of them. There's another one over here. There's 2 very large ones. There's also smaller ones. And some of them still hold water. And they're really pretty amazing. I mean, we start to think about something that was built over 1,000 years ago, and it's still functioning to a certain extent. You know, not as well as it did during its time, but pretty good for 1,000 years, I think. We see going on beyond that point, we see this kind of continuation again of this idea of the temple mountain, the temple that is representative of that Mount Meru. We see this with this temple here, Prerup. And this was built during the reign of Rajendravarman I, who reigned in the sort of middle of the 10th century. And you can see that they're sort of upping the ante with each of these. As we go through them, they'll get taller, they'll get larger, they get more decorative, and each one is sort of more impressive than the one before. And this is another angle of Prerup. You can see it's taller than the previous one. And we get taller still when we go to the Geo. And this one was begun during the reign of Jayavarman V. So again, Jayavarman has returned. So he establishes the Angorian period, which is why there's always that return to that name. But we see it again and again. So this one was begun during Jayavarman V. It was continued by the person who took over from him. And it's also during that period that we get what is, I must admit, my favorite temple, which is this one. This is Bantaisrai, and it is the only temple that has been found anywhere in Cambodia of any size that was not actually built by a monarch. This one was built by a courtier who had been the tutor of one of the kings when he had been very young. And as he was getting older, he had this temple built, and it's actually a ways outside of the sort of core of the temples around Angkor. It's a ways out from Angkor Wat. It actually wasn't. The French did a lot of excavating and things, and they tried to find a fair amount of stuff. And they started working in the Angkor area in the late 19th century. This one wasn't found until 1914. It was stumbled upon by a Marine who happened to be out trying to do some surveying, and he literally stumbled upon it. And at the time, it had been kind of taken over by the jungle. So it's actually a ways out. But it's very different in a lot of ways, one of which is that the scale is really very different. And one of the things that's notable is that there is no attempt in this one to recreate that cosmological map, that this is not a temple mountain. It is not Mount Meru. It's not structured to recreate what the monarchs do because he wasn't trying to be a monarch. The courtier who built this was sort of legendary for having been a tutor to a king when he was a child, and it was very common, not just in the Khmer Empire, but actually in many, many empires, for somebody in that position to usurp the legitimate king's place because the legitimate king was a child. And so he was sort of legendary for having actually stuck to his duty and just tutored the king and then gone on his merry way. And he's supposed to have become a monk when he became elderly. And so he's kind of known for being the person who walked the just path. And so he builds this temple. And so it's on a very human scale. It's not on a monarch scale. It's not supposed to be on the scale for the gods to see, but is more of a dedication to the Khmer Empire, to the king. The other thing that's interesting about it is that it's made of red sandstone. So it's actually very different visually from many of the other temples, which were mostly sheathed in granite or limestone, and so they're usually gray. This one is actually red sandstone, and it also has just the most beautiful, incredible decorative sculpture of, I think, anywhere on the planet. When you begin to look at the delicacy of the decoration, it's really just astounding. It is an absolute jewel. It has these entryways. You can see the decoration of the entryways are very, very differently shaped than any of the other ones that you will see. But it is that warm color as the sun hits it, it just turns this deep, rich, orangish pink. It has this very small buildings in the interior courtyard, and they are, you can see this whole thing is just carved and decorated. It's just amazing. There's no surface that has been left alone. And the carving, the true personalities that these images have, they're individual people, they're not of a type. That each face is different. Each of the women, of the men, of the guards, of the apsara and apsara, sort of celestial dancers, they all have different faces and different decorations and different hairstyles and different earrings, and they're all individuals. It's just astounding. Actually, the word Srai, which you hear in that Bande Srai, it means women. So this has actually been named the Citadel of Women, but it's unclear whether this was, somebody found it later and thought, oh, it's all covered with women, and gave it that name, or if it's something that actually comes to us from earlier times. There are these beautiful lintels that are above the doors of the small buildings in the courtyard, and they depict scenes from various Hindu legends, also from epic poetry. There are a couple scenes from the Ramayana, and I mean you can just see the detail. It's just amazing. And this gives you a sense of also that decorative imagery. This image in the middle is the Garuda, which is a sort of mythical bird. And he's sort of pulling this kind of leafy branch up. And this is, again, a lintel that would be over one of the doors. And just to sort of give you a sense of just what is going on in the rest of the world when this temple is being made, the image on the left is a European sculpture from the same time period. And it, to my eyes, just doesn't have quite the same life that the Cambodian piece does. So, I mean, it's just an amazing temple. So, if you go, you really have to go visit this temple. As we move on from Bante Srai, we get, again, there is this kind of almost upping the ante as we go. The Bapuan has a very, very different layout than any of the previous ones. Even though we're again recreating that mountain, I mean, you can see it sort of off in the distance here. It has had a couple of collapses over time. It used to be a lot taller. But the thing that's really amazing about this is this incredible causeway that has been built. And this area, although it is full of vegetation now, at the time when this was built would have had reflecting pools in them. But again, we get this incredible attention to detail on these pillars holding up the causeway. So there's never a sort of plain surface left anywhere. And this was sort of built, it was begun during the reign of Udayityavarman II, but he was kind of at a period where there was a lot of change going on, and there was, we had Suryavarman I usurped the throne, and so there was sort of a bit of strife going on at this point. Nevertheless, we get really wonderful, lively sculpture from this period as well. And that's something, a lot of what I'm going to be focusing on in this talk is really looking at those structures and then looking at the decoration of the structures. But there is a whole world of wonderful sculpture out there that is sort of associated with each of these. But I just kind of wanted to give an overview rather than delving into that, but just to sort of give you a sense of the kind of sculpture that was being created at the time. And thinking about those first sculptures that I had shown from the Phnom Da period, that pre-Angkorian period, that looked a lot more like Indian sculptures, by the time that we get here, these are Khmer sculptures. These really have a very different feel to them. The features are very different. The way of the body is very different. Certainly the decoration, the headdresses and things is very different. So this is really looking like identifiably Khmer sculpture. So thinking again about the way in which the Khmer Empire sort of expanded out, it wasn't just as we see this kind of expansion in terms of the architecture, where the temples are getting sort of larger and more grandiose and very much taller, and they have a lot more decoration. The empire itself is actually expanding out as well. They are taking over territory. So they started out much smaller, and by the time that they get to this is about what it was during the height of the Khmer Empire. And we can see that it has taken over a lot of, this is a lot of what is now Thailand. And places like this where it says Pimai here, Mung Tam, those are temples that the Khmer built that are in what is today Thailand. And so this is just an example of that. This is Pimai, which is in present-day Thailand, but is a Khmer temple that was built during the period when that empire expanded out. And Pimai is still a temple that a lot of people visit on a very regular basis. There's a linga inside that people come and do various offerings to, as you can see here. After the construction of Pimai, we have the rise of the King Suryavarman II. And this is probably the pinnacle of Angkorean life, Angkorean art, is the reign of Suryavarman II. And this is the start of what is thought of as the classical period of Angkor. And in this relief, we actually have a portrait of the king who's sitting here on the throne. He's got all these attendants who are fanning him. And of course, he's 4 times as big as everybody else, so that means he must be the king. The temple that was built during the reign of Suryavarman II, I mean, there were several that were built during that period, but the one that is really the best known is Angkor Wat. And Angkor Wat, like the Badais, is visible from space. It is this thing right here. And this is a little closer look at it. Recalling that we are looking at the recreation of that cosmological map. And there are those moat-like oceans, and how better to create a moat-like ocean than to build a giant moat. So it really is surrounded by a giant moat that has a path. This is actually the eastern path, which is no longer used. And there's a causeway on either side. So there's a causeway here that is currently used, the western causeway, and this one is not really in use anymore. The temple itself, there are 2 reflecting pools in front of it, as we can see here, on either side of the causeway, and then on either side of the reflecting pools there are what we call the libraries, or 2 library buildings. And then we have the temple itself sort of in the middle. The layout of the temple is really very interesting. It still follows that map that we've seen on the plans of all of the other ones. But it's the one that really is most successful in terms of recreating that Mount Meru sort of layout. And one thing that's very interesting to look at is the elevation drawing here, where you really sort of see the way they have set it up with the prang, with the central prang in the middle. And these actually represent, there's 1 on either corner, so there's actually 4. There's 2 directly behind it. And again, this is recreated down here. So you have the 4 at the bottom level, the 4 at the top level, and the 1 in the middle. And then again, that moat as well. I mean, it's just astonishing when you start to think about, this was built in the 12th century. The manpower that would have been involved is just kind of astonishing. And your fun fact for today is that if you were to take all of the stone that is used in the Angkorean temple, so all of these temples that are inside that Angkorean historical park, and you were to add it up, it actually is more stone than are at the pyramids. So it's really kind of beyond comprehension. There are they built roads and a lot of, and you find these Angkorean period bridges that are still in use, still being used. Bridges that were built in the 10th, 11th, 12th century that still have people driving in cars over them. I mean, it's astonishing. So when you add all that stone together, it's more than the pyramids. You can really get a sense of what those, the towers, the prang look like. This is looking up one side, and people do, in fact, climb up these. They're incredibly steep. And there is actually a chain in the middle, so you can haul yourself up. And I mean, it is so much taller than you would think until you get there, and then you start really thinking about how tall it is. And this sort of gives you a sense, I mean, again, this idea of scale. These palm trees are like 40 feet high. So, this is a large, large, large building. And this is kind of what the view is from the causeway as you're getting close to it. And that causeway is very, very large. So it's incredibly long. As you come up to it, you sort of are going across the causeway. There's the moat. When you get to the other side, there is a gallery, a very large covered gallery with a prang in the middle of it. And then you got more causeway on the other side, and, you walk for probably another quarter of a mile at least, until you get to here, where you're looking at this. And you can see here, this is the central prong, and then there is this one, there's one directly behind it, and again over here. So they call it the quincunx setup of that central Mount Meru, where you have the top peak, the 4 peaks around it at the cardinal directions. One of the things that is very, very interesting about this temple is that unlike the previous temples, which were mostly dedicated to Shiva, the Hindu god Shiva, this one is dedicated to Vishnu. It's the only major temple that is dedicated to Vishnu. And actually, Suryavarman II saw himself as being not quite an avatar, but in some way very much connected to Vishnu. And there was sort of a thought that the kings of Cambodia were infused with a deity. And so he saw himself as being kind of infused with the deity Vishnu, which is why this temple, the main entrance points west, because west is the direction for Vishnu, whereas all of the other temples, their main entrance is east, because that's the direction for Shiva. So it's very different in some ways, while still being very much of the type that we see leading up to it. And it's still something that's very much in use. As we see here, there is a monk over here on the left looking out, and that's once you have hauled yourself up on that chain. And there are still statues. These are both in that outer gallery. But while it's still in use, it is not in use as a Hindu temple. It is in use as a sort of Buddhist pilgrimage site, which is why we have the Buddhist monk there, and the figures that are wrapped in that kind of saffron robe, almost like monks themselves, because it is today a Theravada Buddhist pilgrimage site. And this is actually what that gallery looks like. So this is, as you're walking up the causeway and you're going across the moat, this is the first thing you'd see, and then when you get to the other side, you still got a ways to go. When you look here, you can see these balustrades here on the side. They're not just balustrades. They're actually giant cosmological snakes. This is what the end of one of the balustrades look like. And there's these sculptures are on the end of many of these. This is called a naga. The ones here are 7-headed. And the naga is a sort of mythological creature that comes up quite a bit in a lot of both Hindu and Buddhist mythology. In Buddhism, we often see images of the Buddha sitting with a sort of snake-like creature over him, and that's a naga. But this comes up also in Hindu mythology. In fact, the naga comes up in a mythological recreation that we see on this temple, which we'll get to in just a moment. The decoration on Angkor Wat is really exquisite. There are thousands of images that are carved into the sides of the gallery, into the sides of the temple, at all the levels going up. And many of them are of apsaras or devata. And so these kind of, the apsara are these sort of celestial dancers, or devata, which are kind of like female semi-deities. And so we see just these images carved everywhere. The sides of the temple at the lowest level have these covered galleries here. And these go all the way around, all 4 sides of that lowest level. And of course, the lowest level is the largest level, right? Because as they go up, they get smaller. That gallery on the interior wall that you can see through the pillars has bas-reliefs all the way around. There is more than a mile of bas-reliefs all the way around. It's astonishing. And they are, we can see as we go down, the bas-reliefs are here. And so this is, an early 12th or a sort of early to mid 12th century temple, and these bas-reliefs are still very, very clear because it is a covered gallery. We've been very, very lucky that it is a covered gallery, so we haven't really had too much damage from the elements. And the reliefs are just amazing. And so again, this is that image of Suryavarman II. This is part of a 3-tiered bas-relief that runs along, think about this for a second, the south side of the temple. where he is on the top level, of course, right? But there are those who are less fortunate down here who are kind of struggling through hell, and there are various demons which have these sort of demonic-looking faces and large sticks who are beating these poor people down here whose ribs are sticking out and are all tied together with things around their neck. So we have kind of hell on this level, and then this is earth, and then up here is heaven. So this three-tiered bas-relief that runs all the way down that side. One of the other things that is going on that level is a sort of scene of a procession of troops going to battle. And you'll recall that I had mentioned the Cham at an earlier point, the kingdom of Champa. And the Khmer had battles with a number of other groups in Southeast Asia. They got into it fairly often also with the Burmese, but the Cham were a real problem. And they had a rather successful raid on the kingdom of Champa in 1080. And as the records say, they showed up and the king had to go scurrying off, and they made off with all of their musicians and their women. So they were big on hauling the women. It was like pirates or something. So they hauled off all the dancers and other women and the musicians, which I always thought was interesting. Like they show up and they want the gold and the guitar player. So they brought them all back to Angkor, and the Cham didn't take it well, but they had just lost everything. So it took them a while to figure out what to do about it. But they come back a while later and do some serious damage. But at this point, they haven't come back yet. So he's still, even though it's already been 50 years, kind of in the glow of success. And so there's this kind of raiding party that is shown here. And actually, this one is very interesting because we have two different types of troops going on here. You see there's the ones on the left who are wearing one outfit, and then the ones on the right. And there is a notation, a little inscription under the one on the right that says that they are Siam Cook, which we think means that they are Siamese people. And what's very interesting is that at this point, the Siamese, who later become the Thai, this is when they're just starting to kind of become a force in Southeast Asia. And so we see them appearing, they're actually kind of mercenaries. So they've been hired by the Khmer to help them with going on these raiding missions. And they will later end up being invaded by the Siamese. So I guess this was when they had okay relations with them. But what's interesting is that you can see what the Khmer attitude toward the Siamese was at the time, because this group over here looks pretty regimented and they look kind of organized, and even though you have this one guy who's kind of chatting, everybody else seems to be in line. These guys are just all over the place. They're kind of a mess. So you can kind of read this attitude that the Khmer were like, yeah, you guys are all right for mercenaries, but you kind of don't really have it together. So, and we see this throughout the mural. It's a very, very interesting in that sense that it gives us sort of an insight into some of what was going on at that moment. And it's also something very interesting in terms of thinking about these murals is that prior to this, all of the decoration on these temples is imagery of deities or of celestial beings or it's just decorative. And so suddenly we've got these murals that are showing a portrait of a king. It's the first time that we see that. We see a person who's an actual historical figure. And it's certainly an idealized portrait, but it's the first time an actual historical figure has shown up in one of these. And then we have this image of these people, these Siam people, who, again, it's this idea of something that's actually happening and was relevant at the time that it was being made. It's the first point when we see this happening. Which is not to say that it's all stuff that was actually going on. Here we have the myth of the churning of the milk ocean, which is one of my favorite myths. And this is on the eastern side of the building. This mural basically takes up the entire back of the temple of that lower gallery. And this is the moment when kind of the universe is spun into being, more or less. It is when the elixir of life is released. In this story, it was at a time in the universe where there was only gods and demons. And both of them desperately wanted the elixir of life, but the only way to get the elixir of life was to churn it out of the milk ocean, or the Soma ocean. So it's sort of, milk as a metaphor, but not as like an actual something you drink. So the only way that they can get it is to churn it, but there's not enough gods nor demons for them to get the churn going, so they actually have to cooperate to get it to go. And so, of course, both sides are scheming about how they're going to get the other side to cooperate and then steal the elixir of life away from them. So, and that's sort of what's being shown here. We have on the one side, these are the gods, and on this side, these are the demons. And this is a giant turtle who sort of rises up from that sea of milk and agrees to be the base upon which the churn will be churned. And the churn is actually Mount Meru. Here it comes back again. So it gets used as a churn. And we have Vishnu here, who is kind of hanging out on the churn, watching this go. And the rope that is being used, because it's a rope that is spun around the churn, and then each side pulls and pulls, and it turns and turns until the elixir of life is released. The rope that they are holding is, in fact, a naga. It is the great naga, who has agreed to be the sort of churn rope. And so we get another, this is just a second image of that, and we have sort of one of the larger demons here. And then we have over here, this is Hanuman, the great monkey warrior of the Ramayana, the epic poem, the Ramayana, who is at the end of the gods, and he's got the tail here. As we go around the rest of the murals, we of course would have to have images of the two great epic poems of South Asia, which here we have two scenes that are from the Ramayana, and this is in fact an image of Ravana, who is sort of the villain of the story, and then we also have images from the Mahabharata. And the reason why we have both of these epic poems, one of which is that, well, first of all, they're incredible poems, and I encourage everybody to read them because they're really just astounding to read. They're amazing. But they also spread all across Southeast Asia, and in fact, there are performances of these two epic poems as shadow puppets, as dances, as song that are still being done today all across Southeast Asia, in Cambodia, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Burma, in Laos. And they are being performed regardless of religion. They transcend these things. Even though they both are based within Hinduism, they are performed every single day in Indonesia, which is the most populous Muslim nation on the planet. So they transcend all of these things. And the reason why they appear on this temple specifically, we do sometimes see images of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata that show up in other places in Cambodia, but they are extremely relevant to a temple that is dedicated to Vishnu, because occasionally deities come to earth in human form as avatars, which if anyone here is a gamer, you probably have heard the word avatar. It was stolen from Sanskrit. So, and an avatar is the sort of human form of a deity. And the hero of both of these poems, both of these epics, is in fact an avatar of Vishnu. The hero of the Ramayana is Rama, who is an avatar of Vishnu, and one of the major heroes of the Mahabharata is Krishna, who is also an avatar of Vishnu. So this is why these images appear on this temple. But they're absolutely wonderful. This is showing the great battle in the Mahabharata. They're incredible bas-reliefs that go along the side of this temple. And of course, we have the sort of close of the period of Suryavarman II. Suryavarman II ruled for, he had actually a very long reign of over 30 years, we think, which when you think about the times is pretty spectacular. But of course, all good things must come to an end. And they do. and it doesn't go well, which is very common actually. We have, this is an image of Bangmalia, which is a temple that was built during the reign of Yasovarman II. He is assassinated, and there's sort of a period where there's kind of a lot of people trying to take hold of the throne, and all of this is capped off in 1177 when the Cham come back. So they were run out of town in 1080, but they have long memories. So in 1177, they get on their boats, and they float up the Mekong, and they went to town. They set fire to things, and they hauled off the women and the musicians and took them back to Champa. So it was dark, dark days in Angkor starting in 1177. And for a few years it was very, very dark. And things began to turn around in 1181 when we have the start of the reign of Jayavarman VII. So again, that Jayavarman. Now, Jayavarman VII is, you cannot escape him, actually, in Cambodia, and you'll see why. First of all, he built a lot. And we'll start with this. This is, you will recall the churning of the Milk Ocean. He built a 3D, bigger than life-sized version of the churning of the Milk Ocean. What you are looking at here is one of the asuras, the demons, in his line of other demons, and he is holding on to the giant naga. It's here. And this is the spindle. And then along the other side is the line of the gods and the other end of the naga. And often I would see children who live in the area of Siem Reap, which is sort of the closest town to Angkor, and I would see them out here playing on these things. And so a child sitting on this thing comes up to about there. So it gives you a sense of the size. I mean, they're absolutely enormous. And so this was one of Jayavarman VII's building projects. He was kind of the Donald Trump of his time. He liked to build things, and he built a lot of things. This is another angle, again, of the entranceway to another side of Angkor Thom. Angkor Thom is sort of this area that he sectioned off as being where he was going to put all of his temples. It's not too far from Angkor Wat, but it's very large. It has a number of temples inside, including some that actually predate his arrival. And at each of the cardinal points, there is a road that runs into this, and each one of those is topped by one of these gate towers. Not all of them have small cows. The main building, the one that we most closely associate with him is this temple here, the Bayon. And the Bayon is very interesting in a lot of ways, one of which is that up until now, everything that we have looked at has had a square plan. This one has a round plan. It still recreates Mount Meru. It still has the levels that go up. We can see the central tower here, and there are towers that go around here, and there's another level here. But the plan is actually round. Each level is round. This gives you another angle of it. And if you're looking very closely, you're going to start to see that on each of these towers, there's something there. And that's going to become important. This gives you a sense, again, of what it might have looked like before it sort of started to fall apart, with each of the towers a little more visible. And if we look there, we start to see what it is that is on all of those towers. Now, this temple also has murals. And these murals are, in fact, mostly about life in the Khmer Empire. And they are incredible historical documents and so rich. And they have wonderful pictures of elephants. And one of the things that we have here is that if you look down at the bottom, is that marching army of Cham. He recalls that 4 years prior to his arrival, the Cham came and sacked Angkor, and that entire battle is actually shown in murals on this temple. So we get these really amazing battle scenes, and some of them are really quite violent. I mean, sort of dead bodies on the ground and things, and people with giant axes and stuff. It's obviously very close in the memories of everybody who was living there, the artists and the king alike. And yet, we also have these wonderful trees that are full of birds who are watching on. I love that the birds are sort of sitting up there and watching the battle with the Cham. We have, again, this incredible battle going on. We have different scenes with all of these elephants that are being ridden. And you can actually tell which ones are the Chams by their headgear. They've been given this headgear, which is the headgear of the Cham. So there is this really exquisite sort of delineation of different groups going on in the art. And we also have the Cham showing up in their boats on the Mekong with all of their headgear and their spears at the ready. And the thing that I like best about this is that there are all these fish here, and that there's a little alligator here too. And here they are, they're all squatted down in their boats, ready to attack. But even while this is going on, there's also just regular life going on, and these murals are really amazing for this. It's a market. These people are at a market. It's really just astonishing. We have a market over on the edge, and then we have these guys who are burning these leaves because they're supposed to be curing the leper king with the special leaves over here, which will go into the boiling water along with the pig. And so we have this sort of daily life scenes. And these daily life scenes pop up again and again. We have an image of cockfighting here. These two guys, they've each got their prize rooster, and these guys are arguing, I bet this much, and I bet this. I mean, it's an amazingly lifelike image. That, I mean, you sort of feel like you could see this happening somewhere now. And if you don't like cockfighting, you could always go for dogfighting, which I hear sometimes happens. So this, I mean, we have these two dogs here, and again, the betting going on, and and this wonderful temple-like building in the back, which is, this style actually resembles the style of wooden buildings that we see in Cambodia today. The other thing that we see a lot of on this building, and also on other buildings from earlier times, but it's something that we see a lot of during the reign of Jayavarman VII, are these images of Apsara. And so we have these three Apsara who are sort of dancing, these celestial dancers. And these are a motif that we see again and again and again during this period. The other thing that we're seeing is we have an image of somebody worshiping to a statue of Vishnu. So we have a picture of what worship looked like as well. So, I mean, they're just incredibly rich. And this, I love this image. This is a Chinese ship because they traded with the Chinese. So they're showing all aspects of life, from what they do for entertainment to how they trade to their calamities. What's really, really interesting about this temple, and all the ones that come during Jayavarman VII, are that even though there is that image of somebody worshiping Vishnu, it is not a Hindu temple. It's actually a Buddhist temple. And the period in which he was living, Jayavarman VII, that period is the only time during the Khmer Empire in which there were Buddhist temples being built. Because prior to him, all of the kings associated themselves with a Hindu deity. He associated himself with the Buddha. And so remember I was saying about the images of the Buddha with a seven-headed snake above him. It comes from a moment in the Buddha's life in which he is meditating, and it begins to rain, and he is such connection with all of the creatures of the world that this Naga comes up and creates an umbrella by spreading open his hood over him so that he doesn't get rained on while he's meditating. And so it's one of the reasons why we see this a lot. But again, it's that Naga that ends up on the end of those balustrades is now, here over this piece is actually a wonderful piece that we have in our own collection here of the head of the Buddha. And this is why I said you had to take a really good look at what was on top of those towers on the Bayonne. And as you can see, it's faces. And there's actually one on each side at the cardinal directions. Every one of those towers, all 56 of them, have this face 4 times, facing in each direction. And it is the face of Lokeshvara, which is a sort of incarnation of the Buddha. And the reason why he's facing in all those directions and is on all of those pinnacles is because the Buddha sees everything. So he is looking out in all directions over the world. And Lokeshvara is associated with Avalokiteshvara, who is the bodhisattva of mercy. Again, in his many, many, many construction projects, he tops those towers at the gates of Angkor Thom. He tops the towers at Bante Gede, which is another temple that he builds during his period. His face is over here. This is the other side where the gods are. This is at Tapram. His face is topping towers there. So it is not only Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of mercy, who sees out in all directions and heals your pain. It is also your king, Jayavarman VII, but also to remind you that he's watching you. So you best be careful. And to give you a sense of the amount of construction that goes on during the Angkorian period, this is a map that was drawn up by researchers at the University of Sydney, where they are plotting basically everything. They're plotting temples, they're plotting areas where there was sort of built up domiciles and things like that during that period. And you can see there's a lot. This is just in the area of Angkor. These are the two reservoirs here. This is Angkor Wat down here, and that's Angkor Thom where the Bayon is. But all of this is all where people were living. And there was this massive kind of construction frenzy that goes on during Jayavarman VII. He builds an enormous number of things. Not only does he build the Bayon, which is huge, it is a massive temple. It's not quite as massive as Angkor Wat, but it's very, very large. He has the gates that go around Angkor Thom. He builds this temple here, which is Bante Gede. He builds Tapram, which we see here. It's one of the few that has been left with a fair amount of the vegetation on it, and so people have very romantic notions about it. He also built Prekan, which actually was a complex. It had a number of buildings in it, as well as a main temple here. He built Bante Chma, he built Nakbon, and he built others as well. And so it's not terribly surprising that as we begin to look at them, I mean, some of these are really very, very large. Bante Gede actually takes up a lot of space and uses a lot of stone. Bante Chma is not that small either. Tapram is pretty large. So the amount of just the stone, and keeping in mind that there is no quarry nearby. They were quarrying in what is today Laos, floating stuff down the river. Yeah, it's a long way away, exactly. So, these were incredibly large construction projects when you think about what they were dealing with in terms of technology and resources. And so to be building temple after temple after temple after temple in a short period of time, it's not really surprising when we start looking at these that we often see pieces that aren't totally finished. We start losing detail at a certain point. And it's not that they've lost detail, it's that they kind of started to rough things in and then they never quite got back to really doing the deeper stuff because the king decided he was going to build another temple and everyone had to go run off and do that one. So what we see, actually, these are both from the Bayon, is that there's these incredible murals on 2/3 of it and then all of a sudden there's nothing because they just kind of ran out of steam. And so some of the thoughts about what happens to Angkor is connected to this idea that he overdid it. He overextended himself, much like Donald Trump. And that he ended up in a situation in which it was not sustainable and that they were using up the labor that they had and that people were being forced to kind of tithe their labor to the detriment of farm work, and that this is part of the problem. That group from the University of Sydney actually thinks that their problem was sprawl, so that they were like the phoenix of the sort of Middle Ages or something, that they had run into issues of sprawl and that they didn't have the resource network to deal with that kind of sprawl. At one point, the area around Angkor was like the most densely populated place in all of Southeast Asia for a good while. So there were a lot of people there, and there was an issue with density of population and sprawl, and whether or not they had the resources to sustain that large of a group of people. But after Jayavarman VII, there is this decline that occurs. The Cham come back again at one point. They go and they do a raid on the Cham, and then the Cham come back. And there's sort of a little back and forth with that. The Cham are actually kind of waning at this point as well. The Vietnamese are pressing on them. But it's actually really the decline at this point after Jayavarman VII of the Angkorian Empire. And eventually we have a description from the 15th century by a Chinese trader named Zhou Deguan of what Angkor was like, and it still sounds like it was pretty fabulous. I mean, he talks about there being, golden decorations and all sorts of things, but it certainly wasn't as fabulous as it had been. The capital of the Khmer Empire is shifted down lake at one point, getting closer to where the capital is now in Phnom Penh. They go back up to Angkor for a while in the 15th century, and then they head back down the river to Phnom Penh and then sort of stay there. And Angkor is never the capital again after the 15th century. And what eventually ends up happening is that they really just lose bits and pieces of power over time until by the 18th century, the Siamese, who have really risen in power and are kind of one of the big powerhouses of Southeast Asia, the Cambodians have them on one side, and then they've got the Vietnamese on the other side, who's the other big powerhouse in Southeast Asia, and each one of them has taken a bite over the 18th century. Cambodia actually was even smaller than it is now by the late 18th, early 19th century, and actually Angkor wasn't in Cambodia from part of all through the 19th century and into the early 20th century. They didn't get back the province of Battambang until the early 20th century. And that occurs during the period in which the French are there. The French begin doing things in Southeast Asia in the 1850s, and in 1863 they take over what's now left of Cambodia. So we get these sorts of images when, at this point, this actually wasn't part of Cambodia. This was before Battambang came back. But the French were very, very interested in Angkor, and they did eventually have Angkor came back into Cambodia during the period when it was a colony of France. And the French really liked it so much that they put it in a lot of their advertising. The thing that I like best is, well, we have the sort of Lincoln on the left, which, when I look at the Bayonne, I always think of a Lincoln. The other thing that we have on the right, I love this one on the right, where we have these kind of cartoon birds and the cartoon dead elephant on the right. And it says, hair and skin, nothing will escape these cartridges. So it's like an advertisement for shotgun shells. With Angkor Wat in the background, because again, who doesn't think of shotgun shells when they see Angkor Wat? Over the years, there have been a lot of issues having to do with Cambodia being able to hold on to pieces of its cultural heritage. The pieces are very, very popular. People love the sculpture, and who wouldn't? It's gorgeous. But they steal it, which is a real problem. And so we have these sort of sad scenes like this at the Conservation d'Angkor, which is the storage where once people have started stealing things, they'll take things and kind of put them in storage there where there's a guard that hangs out with them overnight. But this whole sort of room of headless Buddhas that have lost their heads because people really, really like the heads. And in fact, on the international art market, a head is sometimes worth more than the whole thing. So this is why we have all these headless Buddhas. But, the Cambodia is extremely proud of its heritage, and it is still a lot of the things that reflect, that we see from those daily life images, and a lot of that stuff is really a part of daily life still in Cambodia. We see it in the flag. This is the flag, and we see Angkor Wat is the symbol on the flag today. And the traditions of dance continue on. And so we have this image over here, which is from the same temple. This is Prekan. And this is a dance performance that I saw at Prekan. And I mean, it's wonderful to see this in the, not exactly the setting, obviously. Originally there would have been a roof and all sorts of things, but in that setting it's really amazing to sort of watch this performance going on while we have these images up here of the Apsara that they are recreating here in sort of 3D and in color. And so I encourage everybody to be like my friend Adrian here and go visit all of the temples. This is Bante Samray. And to enjoy the food of Cambodia, including the crickets on the left, and to just have a wonderful time at Angkor because it's well worth the trip.